Okay, now that we have NetBeans installed and working, as evidenced by the Hello World program, the next step is a bit of the trickiest one, and that is getting it synchronized with a Gitlab repository. Now, NPS has established one. It is located at gitlab.nps.edu. And if you just go there and then sign in with your NPS login, as I've done here. Now, if you haven't used GitLab before, yours will come up fairly empty. As you can see, I use it a lot, so there are a lot of things here. If you've used it once or twice before, then you will see your projects here, of course. Now, for this course, I want you to create a project called CS2173. So to create a new project, on the upper right corner, just click New Project, and then you'll be presented with the project name. Again, I want everybody to name their project CS2173. Again, capital is what I usually do. Lowercase, it actually doesn't matter for this. You keep it private. And the one thing to check is here where it says initialize repository with the README. That just makes life a little bit less complicated when we try to work with it remotely. So create the project. And we can see the files here, and it has this one README file, and they just put in the name of the project in that file. That's kind of fun. Now, there's actually one thing that you will possibly need to do, and that's if you go to Settings on the lower left, and let's see, I think it's the repository setting, that what you want to do is expand the protected branches, and what you want to do is allow, basically unprotect your master branch, and this is going to allow a developer, which is going to be myself, to work with it. The second thing, and this will come a little later, well, or you can do it right now. If you click on Members and then select Developer and then enter me. And then, okay, now for this one, I'm already the maintainer of this, but basically add me as a developer. And that's what I'm going to need in order to be able to, well, work with your projects, which will be necessary for the grading. Anyway, again, as we can see, there's a lot of stuff here, but this is really all we need for right now. Okay, now the next step is to coordinate that with your NetBeans project. And notice that the NetBeans project and the GitLab repository have the same name. That's totally coincidental. They don't have to have the same name. This is just for consistency. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to coordinate, synchronize what's going on here in NetBeans with what's going on in GitLab. Okay, so here's how we do this. First, what we are going to do is initialize a local Git repository. And to do that, right-click at the top of the project and go all the way down to, oh, drat. Okay, I'm going to have to pause this and reset. Okay, now when you right-click on your project, it will say versioning, and you want to click on initialize Git repository. And it says select a directory. It's selecting the current directory. That's fine. And now notice that Hello World is now in green. And if we hover on that, it'll tell us about it. It says it has been added. And what that means is that this file has been added to the project. In fact, a whole bunch of files have been added to the project. This is something NetBeans kind of does automatically for you. If we want to see what the status is, if we click Show Changes, again, we see a lot of green files here. These are all files that NetBeans uses to basically to configure the project. But here's our one file right here. So what we do next is commit. So right now, these have been added but not committed. So there's this 3 or 4 step dance that we do with this version control. Again, if you've used a version control system before, if you've used Git before, this should all be fairly familiar. If not, then this is something that you're going to have to get comfortable with. It can be a little tricky at times, but there are a couple of ways to commit. So the next step is to actually commit. We can do it from this panel by clicking on this, and it'll tell us which files we're going to commit. We can actually check and uncheck the files that we want to. We want to have a simple commit message. Let's just call it Hello World. Or the other way is we can right-click at the top of the project and do git commit as well. And that brings us to the same place. So either way, you always want to give at least a short message. This basically tells us who is doing what and which files are going to be committed. So if we want to say not commit a file, we can simply uncheck it and it won't go in. So let's just sort of commit everything. And okay, so it does not have a fully specified user. Do we want to set as the default author? Actually, no. What I want is myself as the default author. Yours may or may not do that, but it doesn't really matter. That's just to kind of identify who has done what to whom. Okay, now notice Hello World has now turned black. Black means that it is fully synced with the local repository. We see that there are no working changes here. And you may be thinking, well, okay, so now this should be the same up here in Gitlab. And the answer is that it isn't, because Gitlab has no idea what you've just done. Okay, even though your Gitlab repository is the same name as our NetBeans project, the fact is that they're completely different things. Well, not completely different things. What we want to do now is we want to make them synchronized. And the way to do that is we need the URL for our repository. We get that by going to GitLab, click, see where it says clone. We open that up. We have 2 choices. We can use Secure Shell. That's a nice way to do it, but it's a little more machinery that I'd rather not get into right now. On the other hand, if we use HTTPS, and that means that we're basically going to authenticate with your NPS login. So just go to that little icon to the right, click Copy URL, then come back to NetBeans, and what we're going to do is we're going to do what's called a pull. So first, again, right-click at the top of the project, do git remote pull. Okay, so now we need to specify the git remote location. So this is where we're telling NetBeans about the remote GitLab repository. And if you just do a Control or a Command V to copy in the URL, or if you want to type it in, if you're a masochist, you can do that as well. Okay, notice the structure of this URL. It's gitlab.nps.edu. Here, this is my NPS username from GitLab, and then here's the name of the repository .git. So that's going to be the structure. Yours is going to be identical, except this is going to be your NPS username, not mine. So we need to authenticate. Okay, and I've typed in my NPS credentials. I'm fairly comfortable saving the password here. If you're not, then you can leave this unchecked, but that just means you're going to have to type this in a number of different times. Okay, now we go to next. Okay, so here what we're doing is we're coordinating identifying the remote branches with the local branches, and we can either just sort of check here, or we can select all. Doesn't matter. Either way, this little green A says that this has been added. And then when we finish, they say, okay, now you may get this sometimes. Do you want to rebase? I usually choose merge. You probably won't get that. I'm getting that because I've done this a couple times here. So one thing that you may notice after the pull was that the README has been come down. So you didn't type this in. Where did that come from? That came from over here. And again, now, if you even refresh this page, and we still only have the README up here on GitLab. So, okay, so the next thing to do, and this is kind of the final thing, is that when you are content, when you've done some edits and you want to make sure that they're saved remotely, then again we can right click, we do a git remote push. And what this will do is, okay, we'll select configured git repository location. So we've already set this up. We saved the password, so it's gonna use that, and we go to next. So now the local branches, remote branches, the U stands for update. When we click finish now when we go back to GitLab and we refresh, we see that now all the stuff that we were doing is now up there. So here's our hello world exactly as we did it. And there are a lot of things going on in GitLab, as you can see, but nevertheless, we see that what we have done is now coordinated what we do locally with what we do remotely. And the two are very different. So what we can do is we can make changes here. So let's say do an edit. Let's do another edit. Okay, so, and let's run that just to see that everything is fine. So this, once we start working in the course, what you'll be doing is is adding files, editing files, making changes, and then when you reach a point where you feel that it's where you want it to be, or at least at the end of an editing session, then you at least want to commit locally. Now, notice what I did here. I added a line, and it was identified in green here as a line that was added. Notice that the hello world is now in blue, and blue means that it's been modified. Okay, so, and then if we look in terms of what the changes are, then we see that this is what the change is. It has a wonderful facility called diff. So what we can do is when we open up a diff, it will now show us the differences between the original file and what we added. So that's pretty, so if in a large file, if you've made a bunch of different edits and you can't remember what you did, then if you do a diff, then that will show you exactly what you did. And in a large file, actually, there's a little a navigation arrow where you can go to all the differences like that. So if this is something that, let's say that I've made some edits, I'm content with those edits, and so I will commit them. So, and just again, a commit message, it's not like a comment in your code. It's just a little brief description of what you did, so that if you can't remember what this was about, then you can sort of take a look. Okay, so we added a line, we commit. Now, what do we want to? Okay, I still don't. All right. Well, I'll say yes. What the heck? That's something that. If that comes up for you, you can just sort of accept that, because I'll know who you are. All right, so now we see that there are no changes here because we've committed this. Hello world is back to black, but again, we have not pushed it. So if we look at what our hello world in Gitlab is, we see that it's still the same old, same old. If we want to now sort of, for something like this, if this is an assignment and you're ready to submit it, then we want to do, again, a remote push. Again, same thing now. Notice that, okay, we're updating the master, updating the remote, and we see we're pushing. And now that we have pushed, if we go to our hello world here, we see that the line that was added is now there.